The stars looked peaceful. The deep space around the Yilin diplomatic fleet was silent. Their ships moved smoothly through the black void, carrying ambassadors, scientists, and families. The Yilin were a peaceful species. They believed in unity, in talk, not war. They had traveled far to reach a new world where peace talks were waiting. Their ships were shiny, round and slow. They didn't carry many weapons. They didn't think they needed them. The Yilin trusted their agreements with other races. They believed the galaxy had changed. But the galaxy had not changed. Without warning, something strange happened. The stars around the Yilin ships blinked. Then, sharp lines appeared in the dark. Thin, long shadows started to move. They were not stars. They were ships, many of them, dark and silent. They had no lights, no sound, no warning. These were hunter ships. The Yilin fleet commander stood from his chair. His eyes widened. "Who are they?" he asked, but no one answered. The screens only showed red warnings. Unknown crafts. Multiple. Fast. Dangerous. The Yilin tried to send a message. "We are peaceful. We carry no weapons. We seek no fight." But the message never reached. A signal blocker had already been placed. The trap was complete. One of the Yilin ships suddenly exploded. A beam of red light had hit its engine. It spun in fire and was gone in seconds. Screams filled the command deck. The commander shouted, "Move! Get out of the field!" But it was too late. The hunter ships had surrounded them from every side. They fired with strange weapons, needles of heat that tore through Yilin shields like paper. A second ship fell, then a third. One tried to jump into hyperspace, but the space around them was locked. The trap field had them boxed in. The Yilin had no way out. On board the main ship, a young Yilin officer named Lurian stood shaking. She looked at the commander. "We must send the Earth signal," she said. The commander paused. "No, we don't bring them into this." But she stared at him. "This is what the signal is for. You said Earth made us promise never to call, unless it was life or death." The commander was silent for a moment. Then another explosion rocked the ship. A piece of burning debris smashed into their side. He nodded slowly. Lurian ran to the old console. She opened a locked panel and activated a strange, forgotten button. A pulse of light moved into space, carrying a code made only for one species, a message Earth had buried long ago with an agreement. If ever the Yilin were truly in danger, Earth would come. Now the signal was sent. The hunter ships had no idea. They thought the Yilin were finished. They laughed in their strange language. To them, this was not war. It was sport. They were not soldiers. They were killers. Their kind hunted weak alien ships across the stars, always picking races that couldn't fight back. They called it the harvest. And now they believed the Yilin would be the next. But deep in space, far from this battle, the signal kept moving. Past moons, past dead stars, past old beacons that had not lit up for decades, until finally it reached Earth. The signal hit a satellite that wasn't listed on any map. It bounced from there into the deepest place on Earth, below the Pacific Ocean, where a hidden command center existed. No lights, no sound, just walls of steel and humans sitting in silence. Suddenly, alarms rang. The people in that room stood up. One man walked forward. He was the commander of Earth's Shadow Defense Network. He read the signal once, then looked around the room. "Activate Project Echo," he said. No questions asked. The room exploded into motion. Above the Earth, on the dark side of the moon, strange shapes began to move. Black ships, hidden for years, turned on. Their engines lit up with cold blue light. They made no noise. They were faster than any known ship in the galaxy. And they were angry. These were not Earth's public ships. These were not rescue ships. These were silent warbirds, made for times when humanity needed to become something darker, something unstoppable. These ships didn't carry flags. They didn't send messages. They just hunted. The first wave launched. Dozens of ships vanished into hyperspace. Their target, the last known coordinates of the Yilin signal. Their orders were simple: observe the situation, and if necessary, intervene. As the hunter ships circled the last of the Yilin survivors like wolves around prey, a ripple moved in space. One of the hunters looked up. He saw a flash, a shadow that wasn't there before. Then silence. And then a hunter ship exploded. No one fired. No one saw what hit it. It was just gone. The hunters paused. Then another ship exploded, and another. Fear moved through them like poison. For the first time, they were being hunted. The Yilin commander looked through the broken window of his ship. He saw shapes in the dark. Sharp, fast, and familiar. He smiled. They came. Humanity had arrived. And the game had changed. The Yilin commander watched in disbelief as the shadows in the distance grew bigger. The sleek, black ships darted through space, faster than anything the Yilin had ever seen. It wasn't just that they were fast. It was how they moved. They didn't make any noise. They didn't announce their arrival. They simply appeared, and then they struck. The first hunter ship to be destroyed didn't even have time to send out a distress signal. One moment it was there, drifting among the Yilin ships like a predator waiting for the kill. The next moment it was gone, reduced to nothing by a precise, unseen strike. The Yilin commander, now wide-eyed, ordered his officers to open fire. But it was too late. The mysterious ships were already all around them. It was as if they knew exactly where to be, where to hit. No matter how the Yilin tried to fight back, their weapons felt useless. The hunters didn't flinch when a laser blast hit their shields. It was as if they expected it, and it didn't even slow them down. The Yilin ships started to scatter in panic, trying to escape. They weren't prepared for this kind of fight. They had never encountered an enemy so ruthless, so quick. They had been so certain of their peaceful ways that they thought their technology alone would keep them safe. But this was something else entirely. On the lead hunter ship, the crew was focused. Their movements were cold, calculating. They didn't speak much. There was no need. Their mission was clear: to eliminate the Yilin threat. One by one, the Yilin ships were picked off. Their shields flickered and died under the onslaught. One ship broke apart as its engines were hit. Another vanished in a ball of fire, the remains scattered across the dark sky. Panic spread through the Yilin ranks, and they began to crumble. It was then that the humans made their move. The first of the Earth warships dropped out of hyperspace, arriving just behind the Yilin fleet. The sight of them sent a chill through the hunters. These weren't like the Yilin ships. These were far more terrifying. They were dark, menacing, their shapes jagged like teeth. There were no markings, no insignia, just the cold steel of war. As the human ships moved into position, their weapons flared to life. A flash of white light split the darkness. A hunter ship exploded, again without warning. It didn't matter how well the hunters knew the art of ambush. They had never encountered anything like this. The humans didn't wait. They didn't give the hunters a chance to react. The Earth warships began tearing through the remaining hunter ships with ruthless precision. Blasts of energy ripped through the vacuum, catching the hunters off guard. In the blink of an eye, another hunter ship was destroyed. In the Yilin command ship, Lurian, who had sent the call for help, watched in awe. For a moment, it almost felt like a dream. The humans, Earth, had arrived, and they were doing what the Yilin couldn't. The Yilin had been a peaceful species, and now, because of that very peace, they were caught in a nightmare. But the humans were warriors. They fought with a force the Yilin had never seen before. One of the Yilin officers turned to the commander. "What should we do? We can't fight them. They're too strong." The commander gritted his teeth. "We're not fighting them. They're fighting for us. He glanced at Lurian. Is the signal still active? Lurian nodded. It's still going. The humans are answering. On the hunter ships, things were spiraling out of control. They had underestimated the humans. No one had ever dared to challenge them like this before. But Earth's warriors didn't hesitate. Their warships dove into the fray, pulling off maneuvers that left the hunter ships confused and disoriented. They were faster. They were better. And most importantly, they were unforgiving. The leader of the hunters, a tall figure with sharp predatory features, watched in growing frustration. His crew had been trained to wipe out entire fleets. Yet, against the humans, they were being picked off one by one. The hunter ships could dodge, could fight, but they couldn't do it fast enough. The humans were relentless. The human warships didn't miss. "We've lost 3 ships," one of the officers said. "This isn't possible. How are they doing this?" The hunter leader's jaw clenched. He had heard stories. Rumors, really. About the humans, about their ferocity, their ability to fight and adapt. But he had never believed them. He had thought they were just myths. Now, facing the wrath of the Earth warships, he realized just how wrong he had been. The hunters regrouped, trying to form a defensive perimeter. But every time they thought they had a chance, another Earth ship would appear, tearing through their lines. And it wasn't just the Earth ships that were deadly. It was the humans aboard them. Their tactics were unlike anything the hunters had encountered. They were unpredictable, brutal, and above all, they didn't stop. Lurian turned to the commander again. "The hunters are in full retreat. I think we're going to survive this." The commander nodded, but his face was grim. He knew better than to think this battle was over. The humans had saved them, yes, but that didn't mean they would let the Yelan forget what had happened. This was just the beginning. The Yelan would owe humanity a debt, and humanity always collected on their debts. As the remaining hunter ships fled into the darkness, the Earth warships didn't let up. They didn't chase. They simply hovered, ready. They had sent a message. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but it wouldn't make that mistake again. And as the stars settled back into the peaceful quiet they had known before, Lurian realized one thing. The Yelan had thought they were the guardians of peace. But it was humanity, the Deathworlders, who had just rewritten the rules of the galaxy. The aftermath of the battle left the Yelan fleet in shambles. Their once pristine ships now floated in the dark expanse of space, half destroyed, and limping home. But for all the damage they had suffered, the Yelan were alive. And they knew that they owed their survival to humanity. As the commander of the Yelan fleet, Lurian knew that things would never be the same. His people had been on the brink of extinction, brought to the edge of annihilation by the hunters. But the humans, their unexpected saviors, had shattered that nightmare. However, Lurian wasn't sure whether to feel relief or fear. The humans hadn't come to just save them. They had shown their power, and with that power came a responsibility that the Yelan had never considered before. Back aboard the Yelan command ship, Lurian paced restlessly. He had just received another transmission from Earth, this time a direct message from one of the human commanders. The tone was calm, almost casual, but the words behind it carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. "We'll be watching," the voice said, static crackling slightly. "You owe us a debt now, Yelan, and the galaxy will see what happens when humans are involved." Lurian replayed the message in his mind. The implications clear. The humans had saved the Yelan, but not out of kindness. They had made it clear this wasn't charity. It was a trade. The Yelan had been saved, but at what cost? He turned to his officers, who were waiting silently, their eyes full of questions. "What does this mean, Commander?" one asked, his voice shaking. "Are we expected to fight for them? Will we be their slaves now?" "No," Lurian said, his voice firm. "They will not enslave us, but they expect us to keep our end of the bargain. The humans have power beyond anything we've seen. They've just demonstrated it. And now, they'll collect. The fleet was still recovering, but the humans didn't seem to care. Earth's ships had gone back to their patrols, not waiting for thanks or acknowledgement. It was as if saving the Yilin had been a mere side note in the larger game they were playing. Humanity had acted decisively, ruthlessly, and without hesitation, and Lurian realized that in this galaxy, that was what mattered. Power. The Yilin were in no position to refuse. They had no choice but to honor their debt. Back on Earth, the atmosphere was far from relaxed. Inside a massive underground facility, a group of human leaders gathered. Their faces were tense as they reviewed the data. The battle with the hunters had been swift, but it had also raised many questions. The Yilin were grateful, but how long would that last? The galaxy had seen the power of Earth, but it also saw how quickly humanity could turn the tide of war. The balance had shifted, and with that shift came new possibilities, but it also meant new risks. "Do you think they'll try to attack us?" General Mitchell asked, his hands clenched into fists as he looked at the screen showing the remnants of the hunter fleet. "We don't know," Admiral Price replied. "But we can't assume they'll go away quietly. We just sent a message. Now we wait for their response. And if they don't listen?" Mitchell pressed. "If they don't listen," Price said, her voice calm, but with an edge of something far more dangerous, "we'll make sure they understand. This is our galaxy now. They don't get to decide that." On the Yilin command ship, Lurian continued to monitor the situation. Despite the gratitude he felt for humanity's intervention, a nagging fear lingered in the back of his mind. The Yilin had been saved by Earth, but they had also been forced into a new reality. A reality where humanity was the dominant force. And in this galaxy, power was everything. As the Yilin fleet limped toward their homeworld, Lurian couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Humanity had saved them, but only because they needed something in return. What if the debt wasn't the only price to pay? What if there was more to this arrangement than anyone realized? The humans had warned them. "We'll be watching." That was the scariest part, because the humans weren't just watching. They were waiting. They were waiting for the right moment to call in their debt. And when they did, Lurian wasn't sure what would be left of the galaxy. But one thing was clear: the galaxy was no longer the same. Humanity had arrived, and they weren't going anywhere. Not until the universe understood that Earth's wrath could strike at any moment, and no one could stop it. The Yilin had learned that lesson too late, but perhaps the rest of the galaxy would still have a chance to understand before it was too late for them, too. But would they? Only time would tell. One thing was for certain, though: humanity had only just begun to show its true power. And the galaxy would never forget it. The Yilin fleet, now scared from the battle, limped back toward their homeworld, still shaken by the events they had just witnessed. Their ships had been torn apart by the hunters, only to be saved at the last moment by an unexpected force: humanity. It was not charity that the humans had extended, but a promise of repayment. And now, the Yilin were left to wonder when that repayment would come due. On their home planet, Lurian, the commander of the fleet, stood before the council of his people. The ancient halls were silent as the high-ranking officers and leaders of the Yilin looked to him for answers. They knew what had happened: the attack, the destruction, and the humans' involvement. But they still couldn't fully grasp the weight of what was unfolding. "What are we supposed to do now, Lurian?" asked Alira, one of the senior council members. Her face was pale, a clear sign of her distress. "We've been saved, yes, but the humans have made it clear they expect something in return. What are they asking for?" Lurian didn't have an answer. He had no idea what the humans wanted, but it was clear that they would not stop until they had what they wanted. They had shown their power in a way no one had ever seen before. The ability to bend the tide of war with a single action. The Yilin were still recovering from the shock of it all, but they understood that they couldn't ignore the humans' presence in the galaxy. "We don't know yet," Lurian said, his voice low and filled with uncertainty. But we will find out soon enough. The humans don't forget a debt, and we're in no position to refuse them." The council was quiet for a long time. No one had an answer. The Yelan had always prided themselves on their strength, their ability to conquer and dominate. But now, they were forced to acknowledge that there was someone more powerful, someone they couldn't control. The humans had stepped into the galaxy like a force of nature, and the Yelan had no choice but to accept that reality. Back on Earth, the mood was very different. In a secure facility beneath the surface of the planet, the human leaders gathered once again. Their demeanor was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something else: anticipation. The recent victory over the Hunters had cemented humanity's place in the galaxy. Now, it was time to collect. Admiral Price stood at the head of the table, looking at the screen displaying the Yelan fleet's retreat. She crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "They know what's coming," she said, her voice low. "They understand that the debt will be paid. And if they don't, well, we'll make sure they do." General Mitchell, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "We've already made our mark. The Yelan are under our control whether they like it or not, but we need to make sure the rest of the galaxy knows what happens when you underestimate humanity." "I agree," Price said, nodding. "We need to show them that the galaxy belongs to us. The Yelan thought they could push us around, but now they're in our debt. And when we come for them, they'll have no choice but to comply." The rest of the room fell silent, each person lost in their own thoughts. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and they weren't going anywhere. The galaxy would bow to their will, or it would face the consequences. But as they spoke, a new message arrived on the screen. An encrypted communication from the Yelan fleet. Lurian's face appeared on the screen, his expression serious. "We understand the situation," he said, his voice measured. "We will comply with whatever the humans ask. But we need time to rebuild. The battle with the Hunters has left us vulnerable, and we need to regain our strength before we can fulfill any requests." There was a brief pause before he continued. "However, I must warn you. The Yelan are not the only power in this galaxy. If you push us too far, if you ask for too much, you may find that you have created an enemy far worse than anything you've ever faced. The Yelan will honor the debt, but remember this: there are others out there who are not so easily swayed." Price listened to his words carefully, her expression unchanging. The threat was clear, but she wasn't fazed. The humans had dealt with far worse before. "We're aware of the risks, Lurian," she said calmly. "But remember, you asked for our help. Now you owe us, and when the time comes, you will pay." The transmission ended, and the room fell into an uneasy silence. The message from the Yelan was both a plea for time and a subtle threat. But for the humans, it was nothing more than a reminder that the debt had been made, and it would be collected one way or another. Across the galaxy, the ripples of humanity's actions were being felt. Other races were watching closely, uncertain of what the humans would do next. They had seen what Earth was capable of, and they knew that the balance of power had shifted. The Yelan had learned the hard way that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Now, the galaxy had to decide whether it would bow to Earth's might, or risk angering a power that had already proven it could reshape the stars themselves. Humanity's vengeance was coming, and when it did, there would be no place in the galaxy safe from the consequences. The Yelan fleet had retreated to their homeworld, Lurian, but their peace was short-lived. The tension in their council chambers had only grown since their last conversation with the humans. The looming threat hung over them like a storm cloud, impossible to ignore. The promise of a debt to be repaid still echoed in their minds, and now rumors began to spread across the galaxy. From every corner of the known universe, eyes were now on Earth. News of humanity's newfound strength had traveled faster than light. The rest of the galaxy watched in apprehension as Earth slowly but steadily began to build its power. Even the most stubborn of leaders couldn't deny the implications of this new player in the galactic theater. The once dominant races of the stars were now reconsidering their positions. But the Yelan were first, and they knew their time was running out. On the bustling streets of Lurian's capital, the alien populace was unsettled. The usual bustle of activity was quieter now. Shops closed early. Traders spoke in hushed tones, their gazes darting nervously toward the horizon, as if they feared what was to come. For the first time in centuries, the Yelan were afraid, not of their rivals in the galaxy, but of the very humans they had once underestimated. Commander Lurian, pacing inside the war room, scanned the holographic map of their galaxy. The human fleet had not yet arrived, but their presence loomed like a shadow over their every decision. He had been in countless battles, led his people through moments of crisis, but nothing in his military experience had prepared him for this. This sense of powerlessness against an enemy who had never even been part of the equation until now. The silence was broken when one of his officers entered, looking tense. "Commander," the officer began, "we've received word. The humans have dispatched a fleet. It's on its way." Lurian's heart skipped a beat. His worst fears had come to life. The humans were coming. And they weren't wasting time. "Do we know how many ships?" Lurian asked, keeping his voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside him. 300, the officer replied. "It's not a large force compared to what we're used to, but it's enough to make us question everything." And they'd brought their best weapons. Lurian turned to the officer, his expression grim. "Send out a transmission. Tell the galaxy what's coming. We will fight if we have to, but we need time. We can't withstand another assault so soon." But as the officer left the room to send the message, Lurian couldn't shake the feeling that time was something they no longer had. The transmission to the galaxy was brief, but the message it carried was loud and clear. Humanity was coming, and they were coming for what was owed. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Price stood at the helm of the command ship, gazing out at the stars. The vastness of space was humbling, but it was also the perfect stage for what she was about to do. The stakes were high, and though the Yelan had already suffered, this was the moment that would send a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated. General Mitchell stood beside her, a familiar presence as always. He looked at her with a small nod, a silent understanding passing between them. They had been preparing for this moment ever since the Yelan had made the fatal mistake of thinking humanity was weak. They had given the Yelan time to regroup, but no longer. "They think they can bargain for more time," Mitchell said, his voice low but confident. "But we both know that's not going to happen. They owe us, and I want to make sure they understand the consequences." Price nodded. "We've given them enough space. Time's up." The communication system chimed, signaling that the transmission from Lurian had been received. Price leaned forward, eyes narrowing. She had expected this. "We have their message," Mitchell said, his eyes scanning the readout. "They're scared. They want more time, but they know it's coming. They know they can't escape what they owe." "Then it's time we collect," Price replied, her voice cold with resolve. "Prepare the fleet. We'll make it clear that they don't get to make the rules." The human fleet surged forward through the stars, their engines cutting through space with the speed and precision only humanity could achieve. It wasn't the size of the fleet that mattered, it was the resolve behind it. Earth had been disrespected. Now, it was time to show the galaxy the price of underestimating them. Back on Lurian, the Yelan fleet had begun to prepare for the inevitable. They scrambled to strengthen their defenses, but they knew it was a losing battle. The humans had the advantage, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions. The entire galaxy was about to see what happened when you made humanity an enemy. As the human fleet neared Lurian, the Yelan stood ready. They had fought many battles, but they knew this would be unlike anything they had faced before. They had no choice but to face Earth's vengeance head-on, knowing that no matter what, the galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity had come to collect their debt, and the Yelan would soon learn that paying it was more than they had ever bargained for. The moment the human fleet arrived at Lurian's orbit, The Yilin knew it was too late to avoid what was coming. Their defensive systems, while advanced, were nothing compared to the human weapons now closing in on them. The Yilin had underestimated humanity's resilience, their strategy, and the sheer power of their resolve. There was no longer time for diplomacy, no room for negotiation. The time for paying the debt had arrived. On the flagship, the Endurance, Admiral Price stood at the command station. Her eyes, hard as steel, focused on the holographic map before her. The Yilin fleet was visible in the distance, a ragged line of ships trying to regroup and form a defense, but their position was already compromised. Humanity's ships were already in formation, ready for the strike. "General Mitchell, status report," Price ordered, her voice cold and focused. "Admiral, our ships are in position. The Yilin fleet is trying to fortify their defenses, but they're outgunned and outmatched." "They have no chance," Mitchell replied, his face grim. "We'll be within firing range in 5 minutes." Price nodded. "Prepare for a full assault. We show them no mercy." Across the human fleet, the command ships buzzed with activity. The crew members, trained for moments like this, moved with purpose, their faces a mix of determination and quiet anger. This was not just a military operation. It was a message. Humanity had been wronged, and now they were here to take what was owed. The first salvo came without warning. A barrage of plasma cannons erupted from the human ships, lighting up the dark expanse of space. The energy surged through the void, striking the Yilin ships with devastating precision. The alien fleet, still scrambling to form a proper defense, was caught off guard. Their shields flickered briefly before collapsing under the weight of humanity's firepower. The Yilin retaliated, launching their own missiles and energy blasts in an attempt to break through. But the humans were prepared. They danced between the attacks, their ships expertly maneuvering as they fired back in perfect coordination. Each shot landed with deadly accuracy, piercing through the enemy's defenses and causing massive explosions across the Yilin fleet. On the Endurance, Price watched the battle unfold with a stoic expression. It was a dance of death, each move calculated, every shot planned to send a message. The Yilin had thought themselves untouchable, and now they were learning the price of that arrogance. As each Yilin ship was torn apart, the human fleet pressed forward, undeterred and unstoppable. Direct hit on their flagship. "Admiral," Mitchell said, his voice rising slightly with a mix of awe and satisfaction. Price's gaze remained steady, but a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Good. Make sure they feel every shot." As the battle raged on, the Yilin fleet began to break apart. Ships were destroyed, scattered, or flowed in retreat. There was no hope for them now. Their efforts to retaliate were futile against the might of humanity's forces. They had no choice but to acknowledge the truth that had been forced upon them. Humanity was not the weak, insignificant species they had once believed. But there was still one final obstacle. The Yilin had one last weapon, a doomsday device designed to take down the enemy with them if they were to fall. It was hidden deep within their flagship, a final desperate attempt to hold on to whatever dignity they had left. They were willing to sacrifice everything, even if it meant taking humanity with them. "Admiral, we've detected a power surge in the Yilin flagship," a crew member reported, their voice shaking with urgency. "They've activated a self-destruct sequence." Price's eyes narrowed. "Can they still do that?" "Not if we stop it," Mitchell said, his voice filled with determination. "But we'll need to get close." Price stood straighter, the weight of the decision pressing on her. "Prepare a boarding party. We're taking that flagship." The plan was risky. Boarding a ship that was about to explode could end in disaster. But Price wasn't going to let the Yilin have the last word. Not after everything they had done. A strike team of elite soldiers, led by Commander Sarah Lee, was deployed on a small stealth ship. They flew straight toward the Yilin flagship, weaving through the debris of the destroyed ships. As they got closer, the chaos of the battle seemed to fade away, replaced by the cold focus of the mission. Every soldier knew what was at stake. When they finally docked with the flagship, the crews sprang into action. They'd breached the outer hull and made their way through the corridors, fighting their way through Yelan soldiers who were desperate to protect their last chance of survival. The human soldiers were relentless, moving quickly and efficiently, overwhelming the Yelan with their superior tactics and equipment. Meanwhile, back on the Endurance, Price and Mitchell watched as the operation unfolded. Time was running out. The countdown to the Yelan self-destruct was nearing its final seconds. They had to succeed. There was no other option. "We've reached the core," Commander Lee reported over the comms. "We're disabling the device now." Price's grip tightened on the armrest of her chair. The seconds seemed to stretch into an eternity as the fate of the mission hung in the balance. And then the comms crackled, and Commander Lee's voice came through, filled with relief. "The device is disabled. The flagship's self-destruct is deactivated." Price let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Well done, Commander. Get back to the ship. We've finished here." With the Yelan flagship now neutralized and their fleet decimated, the last remnants of resistance crumbled. Humanity had delivered its vengeance, and the galaxy, for the first time in centuries, understood what it truly meant to face the might of Earth. The battle for Lurian was over. The once proud Yelan fleet had been shattered, and the galaxy had witnessed humanity's incredible power and resolve. The Yelan had made the mistake of underestimating Earth, and now they were paying the price. But this wasn't just about revenge. This was the beginning of something much larger, a new era for the galaxy. The events of the past few days would forever change the balance of power in the stars. Admiral Price stood on the bridge of the Endurance, staring out into the vastness of space. The Yelan fleet, once so menacing, was now reduced to scattered wreckage. The other alien species watching from a distance had seen what had happened to the Yelan, and they knew that humanity's wrath was something to fear. The message had been sent. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from the other systems," Mitchell said, his voice low. "They're asking for peace talks. The Yelan's fall has shaken them to their core." Price didn't respond immediately. She was deep in thought. The destruction of the Yelan wasn't just a military victory. It was a statement. Humanity wasn't to be ignored anymore. But this wasn't just about vengeance. This was about ensuring that the galaxy understood Earth's place in it. "Bring them up," Price finally ordered. "Let's see what they want." Within moments, the holotable on the bridge lit up with several alien faces. Leaders from different species who had watched the battle from afar now found themselves on the other side of a communication channel, their expressions tense. The galaxy had always been a place of politics and diplomacy, but now it was different. The fear was palpable in the room. Admiral Price, one of the alien leaders, a tall, thin creature with dark blue skin, spoke cautiously. We acknowledge the strength of humanity. The Yelan's defeat has shown us that you are not to be underestimated. We wish to avoid further conflict. We seek a peaceful resolution." Price looked at the leader with a calm expression. "You're right," she said. "The Yelan made a mistake. They thought they could destroy humanity. They were wrong. But we're not here to destroy everyone. We're here to make sure that humanity's place in this galaxy is respected. If that means peace, then peace it is." The alien leaders looked at one another, unsure of what to make of the Admiral's words. But they knew one thing. Humanity was a force now. The galaxy would have to reckon with Earth. Price turned her gaze to Mitchell. "Prepare a message to the rest of the galaxy. Let them know that humanity is now a force to be reckoned with. No more fear, no more weakness." Mitchell nodded. "Understood, Admiral." As the communication ended, Price stood in silence for a moment. The Yelan were gone, and the galaxy had been given a clear message. Humanity had been pushed too far. They had shown mercy once before, but not anymore. The time of submission was over. Earth was no longer just a speck in the corner of the galaxy. It was a power that everyone would need to reckon with. Across the Endurance, the crew began to celebrate the victory. They had taken a stand and won. But Admiral Price remained focused, knowing that the real work was just beginning. The galaxy had seen humanity's wrath, and now it would see the power of their diplomacy. Earth wasn't just looking for revenge, it was looking for a place among the stars. And this time, no one would stand in their way. The galaxy would bend, or it would break. "Admiral, what's next?" Mitchell asked, looking at her. Price smiled, but it was a smile of purpose. "We build alliances. We show them that humanity isn't just about destruction. We show them that we can lead, and if anyone tries to challenge us again, we'll be ready." The stars were vast, and the future was uncertain. But one thing was clear: humanity had risen. The galaxy would never forget the name Earth. The age of humanity had begun.